Comment where you're watching from today, as we share a story that reminds us how a single moment of kindness can change someone's life forever. The United Center stood quiet in the aftermath of another Bulls victory. Most fans had already filtered out into the Chicago night, their excited chatter fading into the distance. But in a dimly lit corner of the arena's lower level, beside a maintenance door that few people ever noticed, sat 10-year-old Robert Wilson, trying his best to hide his tears. The day had started with such promise. 4 months, Robert had been saving every dollar from his paper route, counting down the days until he could finally see his hero play in person. His mother, Linda Wilson, had matched his savings, determined to make her son's dream come true. But sometimes life has other plans, and even the most carefully laid ones can unravel in unexpected ways. They had made it to the game early, found their seats, and Robert had watched in awe as the players warmed up. But during halftime, everything changed. In the crush of people heading to concessions, Robert had become separated from his mother. What started as a moment of confusion quickly turned into hours of increasing panic. Security guards had been kind but overwhelmed with the usual end-of-game crowd management. Joseph Brown, a veteran usher, had taken special notice of the boy's situation, making calls on his radio and checking different sections. But as the arena emptied and the cleaning crew began their work, Robert remained alone, his mother nowhere to be found. Michael Thompson, one of the maintenance workers, had offered the boy a bottle of water and a kind word, but even he had to continue with his duties. The game had ended over an hour ago, and most of the players had already left through the private exit. Robert sat clutching his game program, his excitement from earlier replaced by fear and exhaustion. He had tried to be brave, just like his mother had always taught him. Linda Wilson had raised him alone since his father's passing 3 years ago, working 2 jobs to keep their small family afloat. She had taught him about resilience, about holding his head high no matter what life threw at them. But right now, in the empty arena, he felt smaller than he ever had before. Just when the last of his courage was about to give way to complete despair, footsteps echoed through the corridor. They were different from the hurried steps of the cleaning crew or the heavy boots of security. These were purposeful yet unhurried. Robert quickly wiped his eyes with his sleeve, not wanting whoever it was to see him crying. The footsteps stopped. In the dim light, a tall figure stood at the end of the hallway. For a moment, neither moved. Then the figure took a step forward, and Robert's breath caught in his throat. Even in the shadows, there was no mistaking who it was. Michael Jordan, still in his game uniform, stood looking at the small figure huddled by the maintenance door. He had been heading to his car after some post-game interviews when something made him take this particular corridor, a route he rarely used. Later, he would say it was just instinct, the same kind that had guided him on the court countless times. "Hey there," Jordan said softly, his voice carrying easily in the quiet hallway. "You look like you could use some company." Robert stared, momentarily forgetting his tears. His hero, the greatest basketball player in the world, was standing right there, talking to him. It seemed impossible, like something from one of his dreams. But the concern in Jordan's eyes was real, as was the gentle way he approached, careful not to startle the obviously distressed child. Jordan took a seat beside Robert, not too close, giving the boy his space. He noticed the crumpled game program, the red-rimmed eyes, the way the child's shoulders trembled slightly with suppressed emotion. He had seen that look before, in his own children when they were scared or upset. "I'm Michael," he said, as if Robert might not know who he was. "Want to tell me what's got you hiding out here?" The simple kindness in his voice broke through Robert's last defenses. The story came out in rushes and starts, about saving for the tickets, about losing his mother in the crowd, about being too scared to leave in case she came back looking for him. Jordan listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally to show he was paying attention. As Robert talked, William Harris, a security guard making his final rounds, passed by. He did a double take at seeing Jordan sitting there but, reading the situation correctly, merely nodded and continued on his way, radioing quietly into his shoulder mic. "You know what?" Jordan said when Robert had finished speaking. "I think you're one of the bravest kids I've met. And I've met a lot of kids." Robert looked up, surprised. "Brave? But I've been crying." Being brave doesn't mean you don't get scared or sad, Jordan replied. It means you keep going anyway. Like staying here waiting for your mom instead of running off. That's pretty brave in my book. Just then, quick footsteps approached from the other direction. Linda Wilson appeared, her face etched with worry and relief. She had been searching frantically, working with arena security to find her son. The sight that greeted her, her missing child sitting next to Michael Jordan, made her stop short. "Mom!" Robert jumped up, running to her. She wrapped him in a tight hug, tears flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Jordan stood up slowly, giving mother and son their moment. Linda looked over her son's head at the basketball star, gratitude shining in her eyes. But before she could speak, Jordan held up a hand. "Ma'am," he said, "you've got quite a special young man here. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to show him something before you go." What happened next would become a story Robert would tell for the rest of his life. Jordan led them through the quiet arena to the Bulls' locker room. Despite the late hour, he took time to show Robert around, sharing stories about different games and teammates. He signed Robert's program and gave him a pair of game-worn shoes, not just any shoes, but the ones he had worn that very night. But it wasn't the souvenirs that would matter most to Robert in the years to come. It was the way Jordan had treated him, not as a fan or a kid who needed cheering up, but as a person who deserved to be seen and heard. The way he had sat and listened, offering comfort without judgment. As they prepared to leave, Jordan knelt down to Robert's level. "Remember what I said about being brave?" he asked. Robert nodded. "Well, I want you to keep being brave. Keep working hard, like you did saving for those tickets. And maybe someday, you'll be the one helping someone who needs it." The story might have ended there, but Jordan wasn't finished. He arranged for Robert and his mother to have season tickets for the rest of the year, ensuring they would never miss another game. More importantly, he had shown through his actions that even the biggest stars can take time to help someone in need. News of Jordan's kindness spread quickly through the arena staff. Joseph Brown, the usher who had helped search for Robert, shared the story with his colleagues. William Harris, the security guard who had witnessed the scene, told his family about how the greatest basketball player in the world had sat on the floor beside a crying child. But the real impact of that night wouldn't be fully realized until years later, when Robert Wilson, now grown, became a youth counselor, dedicating his life to helping children who felt lost and alone. He kept Jordan's shoes displayed in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from simply taking the time to sit with someone in their moment of need. The story spread beyond the walls of the United Center, inspiring others to show similar kindness. Michael Thompson, the maintenance worker who had given Robert water, found himself paying more attention to people who seemed troubled or lost. Linda Wilson started a support group for single parents, remembering how overwhelming it had felt to search for her child alone. More than the championships, the scoring titles, or the gravity-defying dunks, this quiet moment in a dimly lit corridor showed another side of Michael Jordan, not the competitor everyone knew, but the human being who understood that sometimes the most important victories happen off the court. Let us know in the comments, has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life? We'd love to hear your story. The story of Michael Jordan's encounter with young Robert Wilson could have remained a private moment between a sports legend and a lost child. But sometimes, small acts of kindness create ripples that touch lives far beyond their initial impact. The morning after the game, David Williams, a veteran sports reporter, arrived at the United Center for his usual post-game coverage. He had missed the previous night's events, but the buzz among the arena staff was impossible to ignore. Joseph Brown, the usher who had helped search for Robert, shared what he had witnessed with barely contained emotion. At first, David approached the story with professional skepticism. After all, feel-good stories about celebrities often turned out to be exaggerated or entirely fabricated. But as he interviewed more witnesses, including William Harris, the security guard who had seen Jordan sitting with Robert, the true depth of the basketball star's compassion began to emerge. Linda Wilson was initially hesitant when David reached out for an interview. She had always taught Robert to be humble, to not seek attention for acts of kindness received or given. But something Michael Thompson, the maintenance worker, said changed her mind. People need to hear stories like this. They remind us that even the biggest stars are human, and that being human means taking care of each other. The article David wrote wasn't just about Jordan's act of kindness. It captured something deeper, the way an entire community had mobilized to help a lost child. Patricia Anderson, who worked at the arena's front office, remembered coordinating with security. Richard Martinez, a janitor, recalled checking every bathroom and corridor. Each person interviewed spoke not just about Jordan's involvement, but about how the incident had changed their own perspective on helping others. The story ran in the Sunday sports section, but its impact reached far beyond sports fans. Elizabeth Garcia, a teacher at Roberts School, read it to her class the following Monday. The discussion that followed revealed how many of her students had their own stories of being lost, scared, or helped by strangers. It opened up conversations about kindness, courage, and the importance of looking out for one another. Robert returned to school that week to find himself the center of attention, but not in the way most children his age might expect. His classmates weren't just impressed that he had met Michael Jordan, they were moved by how he talked about the experience. The coolest part wasn't the shoes or the autograph, he told them. It was that he listened. He made me feel like I mattered. Jordan's gesture with the season tickets had an unexpected effect on the Wilson family. Linda found herself talking with other single parents at the games, sharing stories and support. A small community began to form in their section of the arena. Barbara Harris, another single mother, started carpooling with Linda to the games, their children becoming fast friends. The arena staff noticed changes too. Thomas Clark, who managed guest services, implemented new protocols for handling lost children, inspired by how the community had come together that night. Security guards began carrying small toys and snacks, just in case they encountered another scared child. The maintenance staff started wearing badges that read, "Here to help," in multiple languages. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Michael Jordan himself. In post-game interviews, when reporters tried to ask about that night, he would typically deflect, saying only that anyone would have done the same. But those close to him noticed a change. He started arriving at games earlier, taking more time to interact with the arena staff and young fans. One evening, about a month after the incident, Jordan noticed another child looking lost near the arena entrance. Without hesitation, he paused his pre-game routine to help. Patricia Thomas, a ticket taker who witnessed this, later remarked, "It wasn't just about that one night with Robert. Something had shifted in how he saw his role, not just as a player, but as a member of our community." The story began to spread beyond Chicago. Other NBA teams started implementing similar community-focused initiatives. Robert Wilson and his mother received letters from people across the country sharing their own stories of kindness from strangers. Each letter reinforced what Jordan had told Robert about bravery, that it wasn't about not being scared, but about how you handle your fear. Local youth organizations took notice too. James Rodriguez, who ran a community center near the United Center, reached out to Linda Wilson about starting a mentorship program. The idea was simple: pair kids who needed support with adults who could provide guidance and understanding, just as Jordan had done for Robert that night. The program, which they named Beyond the Game, quickly gained momentum. Professional athletes from various sports volunteered their time, but so did teachers, police officers, and business leaders. Each mentor was trained to do what Jordan had done instinctively, to listen without judgment, to offer support without demanding anything in return. Robert and his mother became regular speakers at the program's events. Linda would share her perspective as a parent, emphasizing how a community's support could make all the difference in a child's life. Robert, despite his young age, showed a natural ability to connect with other kids who felt lost or overwhelmed. Michael Thompson, the maintenance worker who had first helped Robert, became one of the program's most dedicated volunteers. "That night showed me that we all have the power to help," he told a group of new mentors. "Sometimes it's as simple as offering a bottle of water and a kind word." The ripple effects continued to spread. Jennifer Clark, a social worker who had read about the program, began implementing similar initiatives in schools across Chicago. She understood that what had made Jordan's interaction with Robert so powerful wasn't just who he was, but how he had approached the situation, with genuine concern and respect. As the months passed, the story became part of Chicago's folklore, but not in the way most Jordan stories did. It wasn't about impossible shots or championship victories. Instead, it became a reminder that true greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but about how you treat others along the way. The season tickets Jordan had arranged for the Wilsons became more than just seats at basketball games. They became a symbol of belonging, a reminder that they were part of something bigger than themselves. Other season ticket holders in their section began looking out for Robert and Linda, creating an extended family of sorts. During one game, when Robert spotted another child who seemed lost, he knew exactly what to do. With his mother's permission, he approached the arena staff, helping them locate the child's parents. William Harris, the security guard who had witnessed Jordan's kindness months before, watched with pride as Robert paid that kindness forward. The media eventually moved on to other stories, but the impact of that night continued to resonate through small, everyday moments. Joseph Brown, the usher, kept a photo of Jordan and Robert in his locker, showing it to new staff members as part of their orientation. "This is who we are," he would tell them. "This is what we do for each other." Linda Wilson noticed changes in her son beyond his newfound confidence. Robert started paying more attention to others at school, particularly to kids who seemed lonely or troubled. His teachers reported that he had become something of a peacemaker, using his own experience to help others feel seen and valued. The Bulls organization, recognizing the positive impact of the story, established a formal program to help families in crisis. They named it the Wilson Initiative, though Linda tried to decline the honor. "This isn't about us," she insisted. "It's about showing people that they're not alone." As the basketball season progressed, other NBA players began taking notice of how Jordan had changed his pre- and post-game routines to make time for meaningful interactions with fans. The culture around the sport began to shift, with more emphasis placed on community engagement and personal connection. Robert kept Jordan's shoes displayed in his room, but they became more than just memorabilia. They were a reminder of a promise he had made, to keep being brave, to keep working hard, and to help others whenever he could. It was a promise he took seriously, even at his young age. The story continues to inspire people to this day, not because it's about a famous athlete, but because it reminds us that moments of genuine human connection can change lives in ways we never expect. It shows us that sometimes the most important victories happen in quiet corridors, away from the spotlight, when one person takes the time to sit with another in their moment of need. Share your thoughts in the comments below. When was a time you received unexpected kindness from a stranger? How did it change your perspective on helping others? 6 months after that fateful night at the United Center, the impact of Michael Jordan's simple act of kindness had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The story reached Richard Anderson, a prominent child psychologist, who saw in it something profound about how small moments can shape a child's development. The Beyond the Game mentorship program, inspired by Jordan's interaction with Robert Wilson, had expanded to 15 community centers across Chicago. Michael Thompson, the maintenance worker who had first helped Robert, had become its full-time director, leaving his job at the United Center to dedicate himself to helping children in crisis. Linda Wilson found herself increasingly involved in community outreach. Together with Barbara Harris and other parents she had met through the season tickets, she started a support network for single parents facing similar challenges. The group met regularly in a space donated by the Bulls organization, sharing resources, advice, and most importantly, understanding. Robert, now 11, had grown into his role as an unofficial young ambassador for the program. During one particularly meaningful session, he spoke to a group of children about his experience. Joseph Brown, the usher who had helped search for him that night, sat in the back of the room, moved by how the scared boy he had met had transformed into such a confident speaker. The initiative caught the attention of Patricia Gonzalez, a state legislator who had been working on programs to support at-risk youth. She saw in the Wilson Initiative a model that could be replicated across the state. The combination of community involvement, professional athlete participation, and grassroots organization provided a template for similar programs. William Harris, the security guard who had witnessed Jordan's kindness, developed a training program for arena staff nationwide. It's not just about security protocols, he would explain. It's about understanding that every lost child is someone's Robert, every worried parent is someone's Linda. We're not just maintaining order, we're taking care of our community. The impact on the NBA community was equally significant. Thomas Clark, now working with the league office, helped implement a league-wide community engagement initiative. Players across the NBA began spending more time before and after games connecting with young fans, understanding that these interactions could have lasting effects. Jordan himself remained characteristically humble about his role in sparking these changes. During a rare interview about that night, he emphasized that the real heroes were people like Elizabeth Garcia, the teacher who had used the story to open discussions about kindness in her classroom, and James Rodriguez, whose community center had been among the first to implement the mentorship program. The story took an unexpected turn when Donald Martin, a former NBA player who had struggled with depression after retiring, reached out to the program. He shared how Jordan's example had inspired him to start working with young athletes, helping them understand that their value extended beyond their athletic abilities. Jennifer Clark, the social worker who had implemented similar programs in schools, reported remarkable changes in student behavior. When children see that even their heroes take time to help others, she explained, it changes how they view kindness. It's no longer seen as a weakness, but as a form of strength. The Bulls organization, under the guidance of Robert Thompson, expanded their community outreach efforts. Every home game now included a special section reserved for children from local mentorship programs. The team's players, inspired by Jordan's example, took turns spending time with these young fans before games. Linda Wilson's support group had grown to include hundreds of members across Chicago. Margaret Davis, a local business owner who had heard about the initiative, began offering job training and employment opportunities to single parents in the program. The community that had formed around that one act of kindness was now helping families achieve financial stability. Robert's school life had changed dramatically as well. David Anderson, his principal, noticed how other students looked up to him not because of his connection to Jordan, but because of how he used that experience to help others. The school implemented a peer support program, with Robert helping to train other students in being there for classmates in need. The media coverage evolved from simple human interest stories to serious examinations of how community programs could change lives. Sandra Martinez, a documentary filmmaker, began following several families involved in the Wilson Initiative, capturing how the ripple effects of kindness could transform entire communities. During one Bulls game, something remarkable happened. A young girl named Angela Thompson became separated from her parents. Before security could even be notified, Robert spotted her looking distressed. He approached her calmly, remembering exactly how Jordan had approached him, and helped reunite her with her family. The moment was captured on the arena's cameras, bringing the story full circle. The incident reinforced what many had come to understand: the most powerful aspect of Jordan's kindness that night wasn't just the act itself, but how it had taught others to be kind in turn. Robert had internalized not just the memory of being helped, but the importance of helping others. Jordan's game-worn shoes, still displayed in Robert's room, had become something of a local legend. Children visiting the Wilson home would listen intently as Robert shared not just the story of receiving them, but the lessons he had learned about courage, kindness, and community. Each retelling emphasized not the celebrity encounter, but the human connection that had made it meaningful. The program's success attracted the attention of other professional sports leagues. William Moore, an NFL executive, reached out to learn how they could implement similar initiatives. The idea of athletes taking time to make personal connections with young fans began spreading beyond basketball, creating a new standard for how sports organizations engaged with their communities. Linda Wilson, speaking at a conference about community programs, summed up the transformation she had witnessed. What happened that night wasn't just about my son meeting his hero. It was about all of us learning that we have the power to be heroes to each other. Sometimes it just takes one person stopping to help, to start a chain reaction of kindness. The conference room was filled with community leaders from across the country, each eager to learn how they could replicate the program's success. Among them was Christopher Lee, a youth counselor who had been inspired by the story to start his own mentorship program in Los Angeles. He shared how the ripple effects had reached far beyond Chicago, touching lives across the country. Back at the United Center, the maintenance door where Jordan had found Robert had been transformed into something of a memorial. A simple plaque read, "Where kindness meets courage." Staff members would often share the story with visitors, emphasizing how that ordinary corridor had become a symbol of how small acts of compassion could change lives. The story's impact continued to grow in unexpected ways. Michael Thompson, working with education specialists, developed a curriculum about empathy and community support, using the events of that night as a teaching tool. Schools across Chicago began implementing these lessons, helping students understand the power they had to make a difference in others' lives. As the basketball season progressed, the Wilson Initiative expanded to include mental health support services. Barbara Jackson, a child psychologist, joined the program to help address the emotional needs of children in crisis. She noted how the story of Jordan and Robert provided a powerful framework for discussing feelings of fear, isolation, and the importance of reaching out for help. The initiative's success caught the attention of the mayor's office. Patricia White, the city's director of youth programs, began working to integrate aspects of the Wilson Initiative into Chicago's broader community support systems. The program's emphasis on personal connection and community involvement provided a model for how city services could better serve their residents. Robert's mother noticed other changes in her son. His grades had improved, but more importantly, his emotional intelligence had developed remarkably. Linda would often find him writing in a journal, reflecting on ways to help others and ideas for expanding the program's reach. His experience had not just taught him about receiving help, but about the importance of giving back to his community. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How has someone's kindness inspired you to help others? What small acts of compassion have you witnessed that made a big difference in someone's life? 1 year to the day after Michael Jordan found a crying boy in the United Center, hundreds of people gathered in the arena for a special celebration. Not for a basketball game, but for the first annual Beyond the Game Community Awards ceremony. The maintenance corridor where it all began had been transformed into a hall of stories, each one a testament to how a single act of kindness could change countless lives. Robert Wilson, now approaching his 12th birthday, stood beside Jordan at center court. They were surrounded by faces both familiar and new, people whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of that fateful night. William Harris, the security guard who had first witnessed their encounter, watched from his usual post, pride evident in his expression. Linda Wilson, addressing the gathered crowd, spoke about how their lives had changed. The Single Mothers Support Network she had helped establish now served over 1,000 families across Chicago. Barbara Harris, her close friend and co-founder, sat in the front row with tears in her eyes, remembering how their small group had grown into such a powerful force for change. Michael Thompson, who had left his maintenance job to direct the mentorship program full-time, presented statistics that told an impressive story. In just 1 year, Beyond the Game had helped over 5,000 children, established programs in 35 community centers, and inspired similar initiatives in cities across the country. But it was the personal stories that truly captured the program's impact. Joseph Brown, the usher who had helped search for Robert that night, introduced Angela Thompson, the young girl Robert had helped find her parents months earlier. She had since become one of the program's youngest volunteers, helping other children feel safe and valued during difficult moments. Patricia Gonzalez, the state legislator who had championed the program, announced new funding that would expand the initiative statewide. What started as one man's kindness to one lost child, she said, has grown into a movement that's changing how we think about community support and youth development. The ceremony included video messages from NBA players across the league who had started their own mentorship programs inspired by Jordan's example. Richard Martinez, now working with the Lakers, shared how implementing similar initiatives in Los Angeles had transformed their community outreach efforts. Elizabeth Garcia, Robert's former teacher, had brought her entire class to the ceremony. They presented a project they had been working on all year, a book of stories about kindness they had witnessed or participated in, each one traced back to how Robert's story had inspired them to pay more attention to others in need. Thomas Clark, speaking on behalf of the NBA, announced a league-wide adoption of the Wilson Initiative's principles. Every arena would now have dedicated safe spaces for children in crisis, and staff training would emphasize the importance of personal connection and empathy in helping those in need. Jennifer Clark, the social worker who had implemented the program in schools, presented research showing significant improvements in student behavior and emotional well-being. Schools that had adopted the program reported fewer incidents of bullying and increased instances of students helping one another. Jordan himself spoke briefly, characteristically deflecting praise to others. He emphasized how the real heroes were people like Donald Martin, the former NBA player who had overcome depression to become one of the program's most effective mentors, and Sandra Martinez, whose documentary about the initiative had helped spread its message nationwide. The ceremony took an unexpected turn when David Anderson, Robert's principal, announced a new scholarship program. Named the Jordan Wilson Courage Award, it would support students who demonstrated exceptional kindness and community service. The first recipient would be chosen the following year, when Robert entered high school. Christopher Lee, who had established a similar program in Los Angeles, shared how the initiative had crossed cultural and linguistic barriers. His program now served communities in multiple languages, showing how the universal language of kindness could bring people together regardless of background. Margaret Davis's job training program, which had grown out of Linda Wilson's support group, celebrated placing its 100th parent in stable employment. The program had expanded to include partnerships with companies across Chicago, creating a network of opportunities for families in need. The impact on the United Center itself was evident in small but meaningful ways. The maintenance door where Jordan had found Robert now bore a beautiful mural, created by local artists, depicting scenes of community and connection. William Moore, working with arena management, had established a tradition of having staff members share the story with new employees during orientation. Robert's journal, which he had been keeping since that night, had become the basis for a curriculum about emotional intelligence and community support. Barbara Jackson, the child psychologist working with the program, used excerpts to help other children understand their own feelings and the importance of reaching out for help. Patricia White, representing the mayor's office, announced that Chicago would be hosting a national conference on community-based youth support programs. The Wilson Initiative would serve as a model for cities looking to implement similar programs, demonstrating how public-private partnerships could create lasting positive change. As the ceremony continued, Linda Wilson reflected on how far they had come. The season tickets Jordan had given them had become more than just seats at basketball games. They were a reminder of how a moment of crisis had transformed into an opportunity for growth and connection. The section where they sat had become a tight-knit community, with regulars who looked out for each other's children and shared in each other's lives. The most powerful moment came when Robert spoke. He had grown more confident in public speaking, but his message remained humble and focused on others. He talked about how Jordan's kindness had taught him not just about receiving help, but about the responsibility to help others. He shared stories of children he had met through the program, each one teaching him something new about courage and compassion. The ceremony concluded with a surprise announcement from Jordan. He was establishing a foundation dedicated to expanding the Wilson Initiative nationally. The foundation would provide resources and support to communities wanting to implement similar programs, ensuring that the ripple effects of that night would continue to spread. As the crowd dispersed, many lingered in the corridor where it all began. The plaque reading, "Where Kindness Meets Courage," had been joined by hundreds of small notes, messages of hope and gratitude from people whose lives had been touched by the program. It had become a testament to how a simple act of kindness could grow into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. 1 year had passed since a basketball legend had stopped to help a crying child, but the true legacy of that moment wasn't measured in time. It was measured in lives changed, in communities strengthened, and in the countless acts of kindness it had inspired others to perform. The story of Michael Jordan and Robert Wilson continues to remind us that greatness isn't just about what we achieve for ourselves, but about how we help others achieve their potential. It shows us that sometimes the most important moments in our lives aren't the ones that make headlines, but the quiet acts of compassion that create ripples of change in the world around us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How has witnessing or experiencing kindness changed your life? What small act of compassion could you perform today that might make a difference in someone else's world?